Committee meeting. You got to bear with me. This is the first time I'm doing this. Lord Mayor's the expert on this now, so we don't have to co-opt anybody. It looks like we've got a full. No, Thomas, Alderman Thomas. So Alderman Thomas is not here. We need to co-opt somebody for the moment. So someone move that the Lord Mayor be co-opted, please.
I moved, Chairman.
All those in favour on the committee? Oh, sorry. Is anyone against that? No one against, so it's carried. Okay. Confirmation of minutes. Who'd like to move the confirmation of minutes, please?
I moved, Chairman.
Moved by Councillor Burnett, the deputy. Anyone against the minutes? Being no one against the minutes, the item's carried. Yes, we've got consideration of supplementary items. Could someone move to consider supplementary items, please? Someone going to move to, Lord Mayor is moving to consider supplementary items. Anyone against that? There'll be no one against that. We've got our supplementary items. Alderman Thomas has just arrived, so unfortunately, Lord Mayor, we're unco-opting the Lord Mayor, and Alderman Thomas is back in the running. Alderman Thomas, so you're well aware we're into indication of pecuniary interest and conflict of interest. Is there anyone got a pecuniary or conflict of interest? There'll be no one having a pecuniary or conflict of interest. We go to transfer of agenda items. Does anyone want to move any agenda items? There'll be no one wanting to move agenda items. We'll go into reports, and reports we go to 6.1, and it is open for discussion, and let's go.
Chairman, I raised some concerns about. Thank you. I raised some concerns about the policy, specifically as it related to commercial ratepayers, and I understand that the report from Wise, Lord and Ferguson affirms that there are some issues with it. That it's a policy that's predominantly designed to be used in with respect to ordinary ratepayers. Non-commercial ratepayers, rather than companies and so on. And Wise, Lord and Ferguson made a series of recommendations about some amendments to that. Now, Mrs. Salisbury wrote to me today and said that there's a draft amendment for consideration which would include which does include some of the things that the Wise, Lord and Ferguson has recommended, and I'll read them out in a minute. But I would like to make just a couple of introductory comments. First of all, there is an LGAT model policy for financial hardship assistance, and I'm sure the council officers are aware of that. And what they state is that it's not intended to be used to maintain financial positions for those who do not need it and who are not genuinely affected by financial hardship. So that means we have to be able to demonstrate financial hardship before we offer, particularly before we offer remissions. Most of us understand that remitting penalties and interest on late payments and that sort of thing, or offering deferrals or payment plans is perfectly reasonable, and that's a set of policies that's adopted across Australia. But it is interesting to note, for example, that the City of Melbourne does not offer any deferrals or remissions to commercial ratepayers. They only offer it to householders. They offer to commercial ratepayers, they offer deferrals, payment plans, and also they offer remissions for penalties and interest payments on deferrals, but nothing else. And there are a number of Tasmanian councils who do the same. So we're a little unusual in the sense that we're offering, or we're potentially offering remissions to commercial operators. Having said that, if we are going to do that, then I think we need to tighten up the criteria. It needs to be that they definitely must demonstrate financial hardship, not just that they've got a 3-month or a 4-month lull in revenue, because for example, in accommodation, those of us who've had short-term accommodation know that until recent years, was very common for there to be 2 or 3 months in a year where there'd be very low levels of accommodation being paid for in Tasmania. So we wouldn't want every time there's a bit of a lull in you know, the levels of accommodation for somebody putting up their hand for a rates remission. So we need to be very, in my opinion, rigorous in how we assess this. So the Wise Lord and Ferguson made a series of recommendations, and Mrs. Salisbury has got those. I don't know, Mrs. Salisbury, whether or not that list that you've given me is one that's available to be put up for people to look at.
Yeah. Alderman Sexton, a couple of things. Perhaps the council's financial hardship policy is based on the LGAT model, so yeah, absolutely agree with you about that. Thank you, Craig. I'll talk about that in a minute. I guess in applying the hardship policy to commercial properties in the COVID circumstance, identified to us as officers that there were some issues. And the report that is on the agenda includes all of the recommendations that Wise Lord and Ferguson made in response to that audit. Then, in addition, the extra piece that is now showing on the screen is what I sent you today, and that's an extra recommendation relating specifically to the evidence that's required from commercial ratepayers. Yeah. And what we've provided there, most of that evidence also sits in the you know, in the residential hardship category, but we've pulled out the ones that relate specifically to commercial, and we've added the audited or unaudited financial statements, you know, including the monthly profit and loss balance, which was the specific extra recommendation from Wise Lord and Ferguson over the weekend. Now, what we've done with that is we've marked the ones that we believe should be mandatory as well. So I guess the Wise Lord and Ferguson audit and the officer's advice is that you amend the policy on the basis of the recommendation in the report and with this amendment, which relates specifically to evidence.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Salisbury. So looking at the recommendation, I would add, you've got some asterisks there suggesting that the items that are mandatory. Yeah. I would add an asterisk next to assessment by an independent accredited financial counsellor demonstrating an inability to pay rates and to rearrange asset portfolios to facilitate payment. I think that should be mandatory. The audited or unaudited financial statements, I think we need them for the current and the previous financial years. Yep. Because what we don't want is something for 3 months, and we've had an example of that. I mean, most of us can demonstrate a reduction in our income for a 3-month period and compare it with another 3-month period. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something that's going to have a substantial impact in the long term and the short term, but not over that 3-month period that they may be able to demonstrate. So I would move an amendment, or I would move that you include the assessment by an independent and accredited financial counsellor, and that you expand the audited or unaudited financial statements to include current and previous financial years. But otherwise, I agree. I'm happy to move that amendment.
Can I make a comment, Chair?
Just one moment. I just want to get some clarification here. The document we have just been provided, it's on the screen there. Is that an amendment?
Through you, Chairman, yes, that is a proposed amendment on the basis of some most recent advice from Wise Lord and Ferguson. And Alderman Sexton is making just a couple of further amendments to it, in that he's recommending that the assessment by the independent accredited financial counsellor get an asterisk, in other words, that become mandatory, and that the audited or unaudited statements be for the current and previous financial year. I think Alderman Sexton, that is a fair summary of the two changes you made to the document on the screen.
It's exactly correct.
Yeah.
Well, considering that Alderman Sexton's moving the amendment, and this document here is just for information, I don't believe we need a further amendment. All we need is Alderman Sexton pointing out that he wants the extras on part 2.
Yeah, I think through you, Chairman, I think that's right. Alderman Sexton is effectively moving an amendment to what's contained in the recommendation in the report that looks mostly like what's on the screen, but with a couple of extra additions.
So effectively, Chairman, Alderman Sexton is moving the motion on the books with that change. So it's not necessarily an amendment. It's just incorporated into the books.
Yeah.
Okay,
Chair.
Alderman Briscoe.
Thomas.
Thomas.
Alderman Thomas, sorry.
Chair, I just want to get some comfort with that amendment, which I understand if it relates to a particular ratepayers, but a lot of the ratepayers, or a lot of the people are actually paying the rates are tenants of ratepayers. So the actual hardship may not in any case be that ratepayer per se. They might have independent wealth, but we want to pass. I'm assuming that if I'm a tenant and I'm suffering financial hardship, just like we've talked about for the last few months, that the tenant would get a flow through of a rates hardship. So in actual fact, Alderman Sexton, what we're talking about here is not necessarily just the ratepayer, who might be formally the landowner on the books, but the person who's actually using and occupying the property. And that's the person that will most likely be the one, in many cases, that will have the hardship. So how can we make sure that this is going to cover off? Maybe it's acceptable evidence to support the commercial ratepayer or their tenants' hardship include. We just got to cover the real injury here.
Look, Alderman Thomas, I think that's covered in the report on page 9, changes to.
But so in other words, you're telling me then, Chair or Director, that when that occurs and it's that particular type of person, that tenant would complete the clause 4 requirements as Alderman Sexton's proposing.
For part 3, I didn't include it because for part 3 has already got it in there.
Okay. All right, that's the main concern, Peter. As long as they're covered, I'm okay.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is covered.
Yeah. Alderman Sexton, can I just ask you a question in relation to making number 2 mandatory? The assessment by an independent accredited financial consultant will actually cost the ratepayer, that will be a cost to the ratepayer. Would you be comfortable if we had that where we had any concerns rather than making it mandatory for everyone?
I think I would feel happier if it related to those who were requesting remissions above the $4,000 that's been delegated to the General Manager. So once we're starting to get up into the $4, $5, $8, $10, whatever it is, $1,000, then I don't have a lot of sympathy. But for that level which we've delegated to the General Manager, I'm happy for that to be discretionary, but above that, mandatory.
Yeah, look, I think I'm just talking to Lara on the run here as we're looking at that. I think if that related to what is basically the larger rate remissions, then I reckon that's probably okay.
Chairman, could I ask or make one question? Alderman, through you to Alderman Sexton, Chair. The word councillor I stumble a bit with. should it not be advisor? Because
Yes.
counsellor
Yes.
sort of denotes some sort of.
Correct. They're not my words, as you know, financial advisor. And most of these organisations have their own financial advisors or accountants who could probably do this quite quickly for them and who will probably be preparing the paperwork anyway.
Thank you, Chair. And just one statement, just going back to Alderman Thomas's question, Chair. The legislation, the retail tenancy legislation that went through, does require a ratepayer who gets a statutory outgoing concession to pass that on to the tenant. So that is now law, and that effectively is called up into the policy by operation of law anyway.
Yeah, Chair, just once again though, whose hardship are we determining? Are we determining the hardship of the owner of 25 properties in Hobart, or are we looking at, and that, I mean, I'm just trying to make sure that we're not necessarily limiting it to a registered proprietor, but we've got to make sure it gets to the registered lessee. So somebody who's leasing the property who's got a hardship. So, you know, there may be a lot of reasons. If for example, the owner of the building has passed off a rent or other concession, that's fine. I'm just trying to make sure that where there's a impoverished tenant who's got a 10-year lease, for example, that tenant is going to be covered under this rates relief in a proper case.
Yeah.
Just everybody, please. I've got the Deputy Lord Mayor who's been putting her hand up, wanting to speak, and all we're doing is, I see him as if we're just sort of jumping in and having a discussion. I'd like at least that if someone wants to ask a question, please ask it through the chair. Sorry to do this to you. As I'm saying, I have noticed the deputy wanting to speak, and she's been trying to speak for quite a while, and then we seem to be getting into a discussion. So if we don't mind, please, let's at least try and have just go through the chair. I'd like to ask, and I'll go to the relevant person, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman, and I appreciate the rigour that Alderman Sexton has provided with this amendment. I feel that it's really appropriate, if not a little detailed. Look, I just have a couple of questions, and it might be reflected in the recommendation and document, but there are two parts to this question. A, should we cap the amount available under this scheme? And B, is there an end that we have to the period that we're offering this hardship policy?
General Manager.
Maybe I'll take the second question first, Chairman, and maybe it didn't make its way into the recommendation, but we are recommending or are suggesting in the report that the policy be reviewed at the end of the declared pandemic. So maybe if Alderman Sexton's happy, that those words ought to be included in the recommendation as well. Clearly we don't want a COVID-19 rates hardship policy continuing beyond the time of the pandemic.
I agree.
Sorry, the first question, Chairman, and maybe it links back to the discussion on the estimates. Lara and Heather and the team have done some modelling, Chairman, on the likely impact of the rates hardship remission in 2021. And the estimates documents say that we are anticipating or budgeting for an anticipated rates remission scheme of about $4.6 billion. That's based upon some modelling, quite sophisticated modelling that the rates team has done. Clearly, if we feel it's going to exceed that, we would have to come back to the council. But at the moment, the budgeted cap is up to 4.6 million. And as I said, that's based upon some fairly sophisticated modelling of the demographics of our rate-paying community.
Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, I wonder, could I go back? It's Heather. Could I go back to Alderman Thomas's concern, please? And the other changes that are included in the report pick up this issue of determining the hardship experienced by the tenants versus hardship experienced by the owner or the ratepayer of the property. And in the case where it is the tenant's hardship that's being assessed, the federal government legislation requires that assistance we provide to be passed on. So I think all of the changes that we are proposing, so not just the one that's up on the screen, but the ones that are in the report as well, will cover off on Alderman Thomas's concern about that distinction. Can I also say that it would be our intent, once we get a policy agreement from the committee, we would intend to mark up the policy and provide that to the council meeting on the 22nd. So you could actually see the impact of all of these changes. The only other thing, Chairman, I was keen to point out was I was wondering whether Alderman Sexton, given what he said about you know, a lot of these big commercial ratepayers have accountants and have financial advisors, and that he would be comfortable with that information being provided by them. In which case, could we take out the word assessment by an independent and put assessment by a suitably qualified accredited financial advisor? Would Alderman Sexton be happy with that?
I would.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start. I agree with the intent of, I agree with the majority of what Alderman Sexton's raised. I agree with what he said about, you know, ultimately the intent of this particular section of the rate relief is not to help people that have taken a hit to their business model, because, you know, I think we've done our bit as far as providing measures for that sort of stuff, as well as state and federal government measures that have supporting those that have taken a hit to keep the businesses going. This is more targeted to people that are actually having a real hard time, and obviously that needs to be properly shown. Just a couple of questions I had. What you did mention about the long term, this is for Alderman Sexton. You did mention you wanted to go look back over a longer term and talking about this financial hardship over a longer term. Would that preclude a business who was previous to COVID doing reasonably well, but has taken such a substantial hit that they're now facing hard times? I just want to make sure that that's not accidentally what's happening here.
No. All I'm suggesting is that the information include the current and the previous financial year. That'll give us an opportunity to see exactly what's happened in the previous year and what's happened this year, so we can accurately compare the 2 years to year to date and determine exactly what the impact of the COVID-19 changes are. Getting a 3 month, you know, comparing 3 months of last year with 3 months of this year is completely unhelpful in that sense.
Yep, fair enough. And the other question was more to the relevant officer. This amendment seems to mostly target or purely target what's classified as acceptable evidence to support hardship. Do we have a codified definition of what we're classifying as hardship, and is there a model that we can use to codify that? Because this does seem to mostly focus on what classifies as acceptable evidence towards that.
Yeah. Thanks, Alderman Barakis. I guess there are a number of amendments proposed, some of which are in the report. With regard to the definition of hardship, I think Lara, yeah.
Yes, through you, Chair. We've used in the policy, or the model policy, we've used the Australian Taxation Office definition of financial hardship.
Now, is that in the report? I might have missed that. What page is that on?
It's in the financial hardship policy that was approved by the council at its April meeting.
And Alderman, through you, Chair, it's also mentioned in the Wise Lord and Ferguson letter.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Alderman Barakis, I guess the report is really only covering off on those things that we think need tidying up in the policy. The rest of the policy would remain as is.
Yep, thank you.
Is there any other elected members wish to speak? Okay, look, I do have a couple of concerns with making the part two mandatory, and I'll explain why. Now, I understand Alderman Sexton made the point that a lot of these organisations, you know, probably have accountants and whatever have you. Well, just to put you in, if I was in my position, I don't have an accountant or anything like that, so that would be a substantial cost for say a person like myself having to go through that. The other question is as well, I believe, and I think this is very, very important, there are a number of businesses that have actually been closed for a 3-month period. So it'd be easy for them to determine their change of revenue from the previous year to this year by easily demonstrating if their business was closed or if their business was practically offline. You know, there are a number of mechanisms there. I just feel that if we make that mandatory, it actually puts the smaller
You're on.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, okay, I'm back. It puts those smaller businesses in a position where they go, well, it's going to cost me $2,000 or $3,000 to get this information together, and I'm putting in a grant. We're wasting money and we're wasting funds. So I honestly believe that shouldn't be mandatory. It should be only if there needs to be demonstrated. As I said, look. You know, just to give you my example, I'm in the accommodation business, and I can prove a point that all my businesses were closed. I'm not putting it for a grant. I'm just giving you an example of a smaller operator.
Chairman, may I respond to that? I don't know that it probably didn't end up in the amendment, and perhaps it should, but the mandatory was intended only to apply to those requested remissions greater than the $4,000 that is delegated to the general manager. So it was intended to relate to the larger applications for remission.
I don't want to get into a debate, Alderman Sexton, but that would actually, if I had to put him in for one, that would be nearly what I'd be, and I'm not one of the large ones.
Chairman, just
anyway. So look, was that Alderman Burnett? Was it? Yes. Okay, Alderman Burnett.
look. I appreciate those comments, but I think we have to be acting responsibly with this hardship rating. So. This is helping business. So I support what Alderman Sexton is suggesting here. I think it's a really good way of making sure that everything's accountable.
Okay, so look, there's been enough debate. I think we'll Alderman Sexton's moved the amendment. Who seconded it?
Doesn't need one.
If it doesn't need one, a substantive motion. We have got a seconder for that. Sorry, we're in. Sorry, I'm thinking I'm in council. We're in committee. It's okay. Sorry, I've been in committee for like this for a while. Okay. Is there anyone against the motion? Being no one against the motion, the motion is carried unanimously. Going to item.
So that will go to council now, Chairman, in a marked up form.
Not a Sorry about that technical issue. Apologies. Conference reporting, Local Government Association Tasmania.
Move that be received and noted, Chairman.
Okay, look, sorry about that. I've jumped. 6.2, working with vulnerable people registration, elected members. There's no doubt a number of elected members have already got this, but it's an opportunity for elected members to have this. Someone move, please.
I'll move. Chair, I'll move.
Thank you, Alderman Thomas. Is there any debate? There'll be no debate. Is there anyone against this? Being no one against, it's carried. Next item is item 6.3, conference reporting. Someone move, please.
So moved, Chair.
Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor. Any discussion? Being no discussion, is there anyone against? Councillor Coates.
I'm not against the report. I just wanted to briefly, I'm not sure if now's the correct time. I was also lucky enough to be at the professional development weekend up at Elgate, as I believe was the Deputy Lord Mayor. Look, I just wasn't aware that we were meant to provide a written report, if you like. But look, I personally, as a newly elected member, it was very informative, and some of it was a rehash of what was already delivered to us in a workshop earlier this year. But I'd say it was well attended. There was a nice cross section of councils there. I guess in speaking to the report as written in the agenda, I personally didn't find the room was full of old white cisgendered men. There was a wide range of people from all parts of Tasmania, and every single one of them seemed to be duly elected by their community. But all in all, it was a good event, and I'd encourage other members to go to other similar events in future.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Is there any more discussion? There being no more discussion, is there anyone against the motion? That's carried. 6.4, it's grants and benefits list for as at December. Someone, it's open for discussion. There'll be no discussion. Is there anyone against the motion?
I'm happy to move it, Chairman, if it hasn't been moved.
Moved by Alderman Sexton. I'll put the motion. All those in favour. Oh, going back to the old days. Is anyone against the motion? There'll be no one against the motion. The items.
Chairman, if I could just say there too that both this item and the next one and one on the closed, what we're doing is actually just picking up on routine, regular reporting that would normally have happened at the March Finance and Governance meeting had we had one. Yeah.
Were you talking about 6.5?
I was talking about the grants and then the following item, Chairman. So just they seem like they're really out of date. So I just wanted to draw people's attention to the fact that they normally would have been on the March agenda and we're catching up. Yeah.
Look, yeah, thank you. I just got a little bit of feedback coming from your speaker, Deputy General Manager. Okay, 6.5, outstanding long-term parking permits debts as of the 29th of February. Any discussion?
You can't go use yourself.
Move that the item be received and noted, Chairman.
Moved by Alderman Sexton. Is anyone against? There being no one against, it's carried. Now we go to a very important matter, the budget estimates. Someone want to, actually for discussion, we don't. Can someone move that we discuss the budget items, please?
So moved.
Moved by Alderman Thomas. matters open for discussion. Please bear with me. I have no doubt there'll be quite a number of people who want to speak. So,
Chairman, would you like me to say some introductory remarks, Chairman?
absolutely. The General Manager would like to make some comments. So let's give the General Manager some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce the draft estimates for 2021 to the committee. In starting, Chairman, I must say too, thank you very much to the Deputy General Manager and her finance team for the excellent work they've done putting the estimates together in what's been a fairly difficult time, as you could appreciate. Chairman, as you know, we have consistently reported to the Council that 2021 will be a tough year due to the absolutely devastating impact of COVID-19 on our community and particularly, Chairman, to our ratepayers. The draft estimates, Chairman, include a number of headline decisions the Council has already previously resolved upon, including a zero increase in the general and service rate, a zero increase in most fees and charges, a $10 increase to each rateable property that receives the FOGO service. This increase, Chairman, is largely offset by the zero increase in the state government fire service levy. And the previously approved CapEx budget that was approved by the Council back in May, Chairman, of $34 million. Although, as you would be aware, we do have a number of applications for CapEx projects in with a number of stimulus package funding opportunities. So, Chairman, the estimates as they are very much predicated on a couple of preconditions or assumptions. First of all, minimising the impact, the financial impact on our ratepayers. And secondly, Chairman, from a CapEx viewpoint, it's very much about looking after and caring for the assets that we already have. And I suppose a third element, Chairman, is that we are budgeting for the worst and indeed hoping for the best. And I'll talk about a bit about that in a sec. For residential ratepayers, Chairman, of which we have around about 22,000, they'll see a $10 increase in FOGO, as I said, offset by the reduced fire levy, with the maximum increase for any ratepayer around about $8, whilst a lot of our residential ratepayers will see an actual reduction in their rates from $19.20 of about $15. This is all about the Iav factor and the impact that has on calculating the rate. With respect to commercial properties, Chairman, the fact that these properties do not get a FOGO service combined with the freeze in the fire service levy, we'll see most of them get a reduction in their annual rates bill from $19.20. The impact of the above proposals, Chair, is that come 30 June next year, we're anticipating a deficit situation of 12 million, with total borrowings of around about 66 million. The situation with borrowings, Chair, is worth noting. Our original modelling and some of the discussions we've had with Council suggested that we'd be looking at borrowing up to $30 million in 2021. But we are now recommending tonight, Chairman, to the committee and to Council that only $15 million worth of borrowings be taken up and that we retire over $4 million in debt throughout the year. The $15 million figure, Chairman, that I referred to earlier is consistent with the long-term financial plan that the Council approved last year. We've been able to reduce the borrowings, Chairman, through our cash flow modelling and also by moderating our expenditure, especially as it relates to our major expenses, namely CapEx and staff salaries. As I said earlier, Chairman, the estimates are very much prepared on the basis of our known knowns and on a premise of prepare for the worst and hope for the best philosophy. With that in mind, we are proposing that we look at a mini budget and review the long-term financial plan towards the end of the calendar year, when hopefully, Chairman, our revenue has stabilised and more importantly, I think we have a clearer picture of the impact of the pandemic upon our community. Finally, Chair, I'd just like Craig to pop up on the screen, if he would, the Risk and Audit Panel decision that was taken today at lunchtime. That has been circulated to Council or to elected members, but I think it's very important, Chair, that you see the recommendations from the Risk and Audit Panel. So, Craig, perhaps you could pop those up for us. Yes, thank you, Chair. I won't read that out for the sake of time, but I'm grateful that the Risk and Audit Panel Chair as well recognised the difficulties in putting together the 2021 estimates and is supportive of the philosophy, I suppose, and the strategy that we've adopted for the estimates. Importantly, Chairman, too, the committee did recommend, the Risk and Audit Panel did recommend that going forward, we separate the process for approving the long-term financial plan from the estimates. And in fact, that's what we're proposing to do this year as well. We submit the long-term financial plan towards the end of the calendar year and then use the long-term financial plan to guide and inform the Council's decision-making process on setting the estimates in the following year. So those recommendations are commended to you as well, Chairman, along with the main recommendation in the report that's attached to the agenda. And happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, General Manager. Are there any questions of the General Manager? No questions of the General Manager. Does anyone would like to speak? Can you put your hand up, please? Deputy Lord.
Chairman, thank you. I'm happy to move the motion as it stands. How does the Risk and Audit Panel recommendation fit into that, General Manager?
Well, through you, Chair, the recommendation doesn't necessarily need to be incorporated into the Council agenda, other than perhaps, Chair, at this stage, simply noting the recommendations of the Audit Panel. That's my. So maybe, Chairman, if in moving it, if the Deputy Lord Mayor was happy that she could add in the fact that the Council note the recommendations from the Audit Panel.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Look, I think this is a prudent approach to the financial plan for the next 12 months. You know, like we have decided to hold any sort of rates increase given the circumstances, and you know, we don't know what might happen in the next few months, so there may still be quite a lot of pain to endure for our city. So I think what we have before us, Chair, is a really prudent approach given the circumstances. I'm very pleased that we are looking at reducing the amount that we're intending to borrow. And if we can reduce that even more, then that's even better. But I think if we're looking midway through this financial year to look again at how we're travelling, and obviously have regular updates should there be any deviation, then I think that's a really good thing. So I commend the work that the officers have done. Thank you.
Alderman Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Two questions. First of all, I'm assuming that the General Manager will bring back to us probably midway through November or mid-December the review of the first 6 months trading. And secondly, on a best estimate, and I appreciate that's all it is, with this sort of level of borrowings, over what period of time, if trading resumes and becomes somewhat stable, and depending on the terms of those loans, when are we assuming we're going to get down to a more palatable form of debt that we're holding?
Nick, did you?
I was going to say, Heather, maybe it's one for you or Fiona Dixon to take. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Alderman Thomas, can I just have the first question again, please? Just the first bit.
That was the easy one.
Yes.
That was just in relation to when are we likely to receive the basis upon which we would look at a mini budget review after 6 months. Would it be the session in January, or were you intending to bring it back to us in December, for example, or even mid-November?
Okay. Yeah, we will do our. I mean, obviously, we will continually review how our revenue and expenditure is tracking.
We're all back.
But the Sorry, am I right? Yeah. But the first formal reporting to council will be at the end of the September quarter, Alderman Thomas. So probably late October, early November is kind of when we'll be reporting to you the first time. It may be December before we actually, resolve on the mini budget that Nick is talking about, and it will be December before we have a new long-term financial management plan back to you. In terms of the borrowings, 15 million this year is what actually was provided for in our previous long-term financial management plan. So the council's financial strategy has actually included all of the borrowings that we're proposing that the council take up now. We're not proposing to take up any more. The term of the proposed 15 million will be 15 years. And we're currently doing our due diligence as to whether that 15 million is borrowed through the state government's 3-year interest-free loan arrangements from TASCORP. How that actually works is that you take up a TASCORP loan with normal terms and conditions, and then you recover the interest of the grant from Treasury. So we're just doing our homework on that, but that is our intent. In terms of our strategy going forward, as I said, the future borrowings are in line with the original long-term financial management plan, and we're retiring about $4 to $5 million a year as part of our principal and interest payments.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'll start by commending the work that you've done, General Manager, and the rest of the staff. And I agree with the idea the idea of the mini budget, because I think ultimately we don't know what the next few months are going to look like. We don't know how the chips are going to fall. I think already we're finding, some things haven't been as bad as we've expected. Some things have been maybe worse than expected. We can't really plan a full year into the future without fully knowing what we've got ahead of us. And I suppose, and it was talked about earlier, the going through the report, it is apparent that there has been a reduction in some of the services we're able to offer, but the intent has obviously been to minimise the reduction in services or the quality of services, especially for core services. I just is there any way of measuring, how we've been able to minimise that? And I'd really hope that we'd be able to continue offering the services that our ratepayers are relying on, and sort of some of the more ancillary stuff, the stuff that's being focused on being cut. Is that correct?
Nick, I'm happy to start, and you might want to add. Look, I think it's fair to say that the things that we've cut out of this year's budget have been the things they're, if you like, a shorter term solution. So we've taken out sort of all discretionary funding. We've taken out each work area would normally in a year do a range of projects. So anything that could be deferred, we've taken out. Now that has allowed us to achieve what we needed to achieve in this holding pattern year. But there is definitely more work for the council to do in terms of a more structural, strategic review of the business of the council, and that needs to happen in the first half of 2021.
Yeah, because I suppose the follow-up question from that then is, and that might be an answer or a question more for the follow-up budget after this mini budget, is the difference between deferrals and things that have been cut is, if we're deferring a whole bunch of stuff, does that mean we're going to have this huge influx of stuff that we're going to have to pay for in the future that's going to, effectively defeat the purpose of these savings that we're trying to make?
Yeah, the long-term financial management plan that we've attached to this document is predicated on us continuing to achieve the $5 million in savings that we've achieved here, plus a further $1 million in 2021, which gets to the $6 million that the council has requested resolved that we should find. It just might be that after the strategic thinking is done about services, that some of the things that have come out of this year may go back in and other things may be looked at.
Thank you.
Is that all, Alderman Barakis?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Any other discussion? Okay, if there's no other discussion, I'd just like to make a few points on. It's good to see that we've found quite a considerable amount of savings at the end. I commend the general manager, the deputy general manager, and all the staff for their hard work in doing so, because you know, we need to sharpen our pencil and demonstrate to the ratepayers, in particular those who are doing it tough, that we've got to sharpen our pencil up. And it's good to see that we're going to also, you know, keep this going forward. So hopefully that the debt that this council is in is not going to be a long-term burden on future ratepayers. And you know, that was the plan that we set. You know, maybe some of us are not going to possibly see some of our pet projects come to fruition, or some of the things that we want to see, or some ratepayers may not see some of the things that they've been hoping to see. But at the end of the day, we've got to be smart in the way we operate. Just a few things in regards to you know, what I envisaged in my discussions with people. I actually have got some serious concerns about when the job keeper program finishes in September. There's quite a number of people and businesses out there just treading on water. Once the JobKeeper program is removed, and hopefully it's not, and it continues, you know, it's going to go through to that sort of Christmas, New Year period. But you know, I'm still concerned about whether or not we've actually hit the financial impact. A number of people I've had discussions with who have got a far better understanding of the financial matters than I have, are saying that that, you know, 2021 is going to be could potentially be a very bad year. So we've got to look at that, and hopefully, you know, once the JobKeeper program finishes, we can sort of get an understanding. But anyway, look, that's the future. We don't know what the future's got to hold, but I just hope that we don't get hit with any more. So I'll considering there's no more discussion, is there anyone against the budget estimates? Being no one against the budget estimates, the matter is resolved. Right, let's go to item 8, which is question. Okay, I missed that one. We're going to 7.1 now, which is committee status report. Has anyone got anything they'd like to raise? Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thanks, Chairman. There's a couple of things on here. I just wonder if they can go off. So item 7 was proposed to be deleted, the university's conference and study tour. And I think that's, if we can delete that, I'm happy to move the status report.
I would say that could be removed. General Manager is nodding yes. So so the deputies move to remove item 7. Anyone against? Being no one against, the item's carried. Item 8, we go to questions on notice. Any questions on notice? Alderman Barakis.
Yes, Chair. Apologies in advance. I've got 2 questions and they're somewhat long-winded, so I'll try and get through them as quick as possible.
Well, can you get through them as quickly as possible?
Yes, I will. Okay. Question for the General Manager. During the COVID shutdowns, there's obviously been a need for workers to work from home. There's also been, I think, some commentary from external commentary that the success of the people working from home should potentially be a sign that we should look to doing this outside of the coronavirus restrictions in the interest of promoting flexibility in the workforce. So just to that, I've got some questions. Have there been any impacts, either positive or negative, to the productivity of staff? Is there any way to measure said productivity of workers that are working remotely? And if so, what have those metrics shown?
Chairman, I'll take the question on notice.
Thank you very
General
much.
Manager's taking the question on notice as normal.
I do have another question. I'm happy to provide. I'm happy to email these questions through because they're reasonably long-winded. The second question, in regards to the council's Project Phoenix, just a couple of questions around that. What was because this did occur before I was elected, and some of the people on the council were around. What was the initial budgeted or expected cost for the project? And then what was the actual realised cost of implementing the project, and what was the difference? What was the expected time frame for implementation of the project, and what was the realised time of implementation? And then finally, what KPIs were set for the project, and how did it perform against those KPIs?
I'm very happy to take that question on notice, Chairman.
Much appreciated.
I have no doubt the General Manager is going to take that on notice. Hopefully you can provide that information to the General Manager.
I'll do that right away.
Is there any other questions?
Yes, Chairman.
Alderman Sexton.
Thank you. Look, it's not. I'm not really asking for an answer now. I'm just requesting that that the Finance and Governance Committee be provided with a monthly report showing listing the recipients and the amounts of rate remissions that have been granted under the COVID-19 policy.
Noted, Chairman, and I do recall that might have been part of the original motion that went past when the policy was first adopted back in March. But noted, Chairman, it's a formal answer.
It's taken on board, Alderman Sexton. Yep. Any other questions?
Yes, please, if I could, Chair.
Councillor Coates.
Thanks. And look, this maybe unnecessary, might be my misunderstanding, but I guess my question, when I was looking through the Capital Works grant request listing, the whole Saddle project appeared on there, and I guess I'm just confused because we hadn't yet considered that. So my question is, how is the whole Saddle one included in the Capital Works listing when it was yet to be considered by us as a council?
Can answer that, please, General Manager.
Well, I'll take it on notice, Chairman.
Take it on notice. It's been taken on notice. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Councillor Ewan.
Ewan, yep, thank you. So I was just wondering if there is anything stopping us from having these meetings online, or at least having the ability for people to phone in after the COVID crisis is over. Because it's really good for me. I've really enjoyed being able to dial into the committee meetings that I'm not necessarily on, but just hear the reports and representations and stuff.
Chairman, maybe if I've heard the question correctly, we can continue these meetings in this format whilst the gazetted order is in place. The gazetted order is in place until the pandemic is declared over, which at this stage is August, and then plus 60 days. So will be a matter for the council, Chair, but we can continue effectively till October under the current arrangements.
Thank you, General Manager. Any other questions?
Chairman, it's Heather, can I just check that...
Deputy Lord Mayor. Deputy General Manager.
Okay, thank you. I didn't respond to Deputy Lord Mayor. Can I just check that Councillor Ewan, I wasn't aware that she was attending, that they were attending the meeting. Does Councillor Ewan want to be recorded as an attendee of the meeting, in which case could you just turn the camera on just for a few moments, please? Cool.
Okay, she's recorded as in.
She's in. Thank you, Chairman.
And apologies, Deputy Lord Mayor. Okay, so there'll be no more questions. We now will be going to closed portion of the meeting. Someone move.
So moved.
Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor. Anyone against that? No one against. Thank you very much, and thank you all for listening.